Sorry. Hello everyone, welcome to the food labeling session. My name is Ian, I'm a PhD student at UF. So today we're going to have 4 presentations on food labeling. So first we will have Alexandra from University of Connecticut. She's going to join there to present her research. The stage are yours.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alex McLeod, and thank you for the opportunity today to present our research aligning values to labels. I am starting my PhD in agricultural and resource economics at the University of Connecticut this fall. And my co-authors are Wei Yang from the University of Arkansas, Dee Fang from the University of Florida, and Rodolfo Naiga from Texas A&M. So here's the outline of the presentation that I'm going to give today, but let's go ahead and dive right in. So looking at the background and motivation for this study, it was really rooted in the increased number of labels in the market and that it's increasing consumer confusion and misperception, as well documented in the literature review that I did. Consumers tend to overinterpret labels, which means that they're associating certain characteristics with a label that's incorrect. Sustainability related food labels are actually the most frequently misinterpreted labels on the market, with natural being the most used label on the market, but it's actually the most misinterpreted. For example, Consumer Reports actually petitioned the USDA to ban the use of natural labeling because more than 60% of the consumers wrongly believe that meat labeled as natural was raised without antibiotics, growth hormones, and genetically modified organisms in the production process, which is not accurate. Looking more into the different labels, we used the Eco-Label Index database in order to find the labels that we focused on in this study. This database is actually currently tracking 456 eco-labels in 199 countries and 25 industry sectors. Just to give you an image of what one of the inserts looked like in the Eco-Label Index, this is for American grass-fed. As you can see, you have the definition of what it is. You have a little bit of information about it. You also have the standards for their label, how it's analyzed, how it's actually perceived, and their managing organization. If you purchase the more expensive or the more like actual subscription to it, you get a lot more information. That's what we did when we were collecting all the data for the labels in order to create the survey instrument. So we had all the information that we needed about the labels. So that's a really great resource for anybody to use. To focus more in on the labels, seals, and claims that we used for this study, we actually used 9 seals and 3 claims. So seals are graphics combining a logo or an image with a short claim, and claims are words or phrases that are printed on the label. Claims are typically not actually verified and their standards aren't very strict. So have any of you seen the seals that are on this? Have you guys seen any of them? Yeah. Most of them you've probably seen. There's a couple that maybe you haven't seen much of, which is the Certified B Corporation and probably One Health Certified. These are newer ones on the market, but they are common in the market. Then most of you have probably seen the claims that are provided on there with the no antibiotics, non-GMO, and all natural. The top 4 seals that are in the market right now with the most rigorous verification process and the most strict standards are in red. So the American Grass-Fed, Animal Welfare Approved, Non-GMO Project Verified, and USDA Organic. Looking at the food values that we focused on in this study, food values are actually the food quality attributes consumers use when making purchasing decisions. These include credence attributes, experience attributes, and price attributes. So for credence attributes, those are characteristics consumers cannot decipher when looking at a product. And so that would be like naturalness, the safety of the product. So if it's going to make you sick or not, the origin, so where it's from, you can't just tell that by looking at a food. You need more information than that. And then experience attributes are characteristics consumers can personally experience. So the taste, the appearance, convenience, so how easy it is to cook or make, and the novelty, if it's something new that you haven't tried before. So our study was the first of its kind to really look at this many labels and that many food values, but we really wanted to see if they interacted or if they aligned. So looking at the definitions provided by Consumer Reports in the Eco-Label Index for those labels, and then looking at the definitions for the food values as provided in our literature review, we found that the 9 labels that we used in the study actually aligned with 5 of the food values that we wanted to look at. So this is how they align. As you can see, a couple of the food labels actually align with 2 or more of the food values. And we'll talk about those a little bit more in a little bit. But for more information on those definitions that we included in a more descriptive table, you can look at our paper. So for the study, we really wanted to look at the relationship between food labels and food value preferences. We did this by identifying consumer preference ranking for the 12 food labels and food values, and then determining if the consumer preference ranking changes by providing more information. Again, I'll explain that in more detail later as I explain the treatment groups that we used. And then we wanted to determine if there was that connection between the food labels and food attributes. For our methods, we use the best worst scaling approach for the food value and food label preference shares. Respondents were asked to select their most important and least important item in each choice set. The survey design used a partially balanced incomplete design in order to design the food value and food label choice sets, which means that each item was repeated the same number of times and each choice set had 4 labels or values to choose from. We controlled for bias in multiple ways, because the order of choice sets were randomized across the respondents in order to control for position bias. And then the order of the food value choice set section and the food label choice set section was randomized across respondents in order to control for order bias. So for our treatments, participants were put into one of 3 groups to identify the impact more information would have on the label preferences. For the control group in the food labeling questions, they were only shown the image of the label. For treatment 1, they were shown the image in the label description. And for treatment 2, they were shown the image, label description, and the verification statement. Again, all of this information was provided through the consumer reports, eco-label index, and the websites for each label. To look at this a little bit more, this is actually what the choice sets would have looked like in the instrument. So you can see the control, how they have the 4 images that they can pick from. So the 4 different labels they can pick from as their most important and least important. Treatment 1 has the images and descriptions, and treatment 2 has their image, description, and verification statement. As you can see, they were randomized, but this is just one example of the question choice sets that we had. We used a random parameter logit model in order to analyze the data. All the models were developed from random utility theory. Using the RPL, we calculated the preference shares and correlations between food labels and food values. The RPL models were estimated using the GMNL package in R. For our sample, we targeted it from the general US population using Dynata. Can I ever pronounce that correctly? We actually had a sample size of 1,200. But we restricted the sample down by removing participants who spent less than 5 minutes or more than 60 minutes in the survey, and those who did not answer the attention check questions correctly. So we ended up with a final sample of 1,158 responses. Participants were again randomized into those 3 groups like I've already discussed, but just wanted to remind everybody. For our sample statistics, you can see that our sample was well balanced. 52% were female, 62% white, 48% were married, 25% had earned a 4-year degree, and 57% had a gross household income of less than $59,000. Looking more into our results, we see that the food label ranking, this is just a brief overview of the top 3 food labels that we found using those preference shares across those treatment groups. So remember, the control group, they were only shown the image. Treatment 1 saw the image and a description, and treatment 2 saw the image, description, and verification statement. As you can see in the control group, the top 2 food labels that had the most preference shares were actually the claims. And remember, those claims are not verified and they don't have strict standards or rules. For the preference share estimates, you can see this in more detail here. The B Corporation was most frequently ranked as the least important, so it was used as our baseline for analyses. No antibiotics was actually found to be had the most preference shares for the control group. And USDA Organic had the most preference shares for the treatment 1 group and the treatment 2 group. To look at this in a different way, this is more in a graphical representation that you can easily see how the preference shares were set up across all the different groups. So the control group was in the top part, treatment 1 was in the middle, and treatment 2 was at the bottom. You can see all of the labels that we looked at along the bottom of that line. And again, B Corporation was our baseline, and non-GMO was actually selected as the least important across all 3 groups, as you can see in this graph. We really wanted to see if more information changed the food label preference, and we did find that that's true. More information did change the food label preference, as was shown as the interest in Food Alliance certified and American grass-fed increased as more information was provided in the T1 and T2 compared to the control group. The 3 claims did actually lose importance as more information was provided. And so that was also interesting. So then looking more into the food value rankings, we actually found that it was similar for all the groups. So as you can see, safety ranked first among all of the groups, followed by taste, and then either nutrition or price. But these were the top 4 food values. Looking at the preference share estimates for the food values, novelty was most frequently rated as least important, so it was used as our baseline for analyses. Food value ranking was similar again across treatment groups, but safety had the highest preference shares for each group. Looking at it in more detail, you can see very easily that they were very similar. All the graphs were very similar on this one. But these are the food value rankings, and the preference shares, as you can see, controls on the top, treatment 1's the middle, and treatment 2 is at the bottom. Putting together the food label and food value correlations, we actually found that highly significant correlations were found between the food label and food attributes for 7 of those in the control group, no, 6 of those in the control group, 7 of those in the treatment 1 group, and then only 2 in the treatment 2 group were highly significantly correlated. So we actually found that the correlations show that information can be beneficial, but too much can actually be unnecessary or even harmful when it comes to those preference shares. So some of the correlations decreased as more information was provided for that label. In the T1 group, we saw an increase in those preference shares for some. And then as the T2 group happened, once we added those verification statements, our preference shares actually went down. So that might be too much. It might be an overload of information. So in conclusion, more information did change the preference shares. Natural and no antibiotics are still among the most misinterpreted labels, as shown by the decrease in importance as more information was provided. And certification statements can actually harm the perception of the label, as I just mentioned, because it did create that decrease in the preference shares. So recommendations, we do believe that the study should be replicated to further look at that relationship between food values and food labels. Labels should be clear and include a description for the requirement for certification, but too much information, again, can be harmful. So you want it to be clear, but you want it to kind of stick to that point. Consumer fatigue is an issue because too much information can overwhelm the consumer. And with so many labels on the food packaging, that can be too much for a consumer to try to look at. And so it will actually cause their preference shares to decrease. Labels should be designed with their food values in mind because consumers perceive a label as less important when the label doesn't actually align with the core food values. So we should keep that in mind when we're creating our labels. So thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes. Oh yeah, the participants. I'll go back to their more information. So we used Dynata to get all of our participants, and we created the survey in Qualtrics, but when we gave it to Dynata, we didn't tell them any kind of limiting variable. We just wanted we just targeted the United States consumers. There we go. There we go. Finally got back to the right slide. Yes.
That was really interesting. So one of your kind of recommendations was the label should come with some information. Are you thinking of that whole sentence that you had in the sentence description underneath each one? Because I'm just wondering, is that I think that would fit on the label?
I don't think it would fit on a label. I do think that maybe more of like a bulleted form. So like just quick, I mean, I guess kind of going towards that claim side of it, but you would have the actual seal that shows that it has been certified, but then you'd have the claim underneath that would explain what they did. And I think that would help instead of doing full sentences, because that would get, like you said, it would get very lengthy on those labels. I don't know, but I bet there probably are. Do you know of any?
No, because usually I think about, like, I think it's usually just the logo.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of looking at like One Health Certified. They have a very interesting logo, and a lot of different companies are using different logos. And the USDA organic logo actually was one of the top preferred across the board in our study. And we do kind of think that it might be because of their efforts in trying to increase consumer awareness and consumer literacy when it comes to their label. They didn't change their label, but they just did a huge education campaign on how to understand their label and everything that they do to get that. So I think it could be a mixture of changing the labels or just getting more information out there.
And did you ask them about how aware they were about
Yes. Yeah. We did not ask them if they were previously aware of any of those. No, but that would have been a good idea. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to collect some data about people's previous knowledge about different labels? Because I believe the information treatment might have various effect on people who have different previous knowledge about labels.
So do you mean by if they look at labels when they go shopping?
Yeah, for example, the USDA organic is well-known labels. So when people are really well know about these labels, you give them kind of information treatment about what label means. The fact in this probably is not very important compared to other labels who are not very familiar with.
Yes.
So I just wonder if you have a chance to collect the data on people's previous knowledge.
We didn't really look at previous knowledge on the labels. We did look at like shopping frequency, so how frequently they shop, if they do look at labels whenever they shop, but we didn't look at specifically each label if they had seen it before. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, I'll try to close out of that.
So next we have Ganel from Auburn University. So sorry, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. And thanks for being here at one of the last sessions. So I'm going to talk about one of the studies we did at Cornell. We're still trying to publish it, but the idea, I'll talk a little bit about motivation, where it came from, and then because of the difficulty to collect data, we just kind of shift the gear to collect the data differently. So the study kind of changed a little bit, but overall it's the still answering the same question though. So we wanted to know how logo visibility impacts consumer perception and recall and subsequent willingness to pay. And what I mean by visibility, I didn't have a canned drink with me, but assuming that's a canned drink, whenever we hold it to a line for the drinking, there is always empty space between our fingers. And sometimes you can see the logo, sometimes no. It's a random technology, so it's basically random. So we wanted to know, actually, somebody else was interested to see whether or not that, is it worth enough to input that money, to put the money, and then make it so it's not random anymore, so people always see that logo, whatever you're drinking. And that said, we did field study, but it was too noisy because we did a study in one of the dineries. We couldn't record the session because of IRB issues. And so it was really noisy. So eventually we ended up doing product placement type of study. So we kind of analyze product placement, answering these questions. So that's kind of the background where it comes from, where we do. And we use ginger ale because, as you know, let's say if I have Coke on my hand, even without seeing the logo, I'm sure most of you will recognize it's Pepsi or Coke. So ginger ale, overall, the brands, they are all limey and greenish, so it's very difficult to identify, and at least more difficult than others. And there's also kind of it's not the most favorite drink, so we just kind of bias at least the preferences for Coke and Pepsi or I don't know, Fanta or whatever. And just briefly for motivation, we all know that brands matter, right? The packaging matters, logos matter. So I'll not dive into those, but those are really important components of all the packaging in general. And there's tons of research about logos, the different parts of the logos, or even the font size or the color scheme. Everything really matters as on the consumers. I'll kind of skip that part because we know they're important, but they're just not, let's say, I'll not talk into details for now. Advertising impacts the brand equity, brand recognition, and we know there's tons of different types of advertising. Let's say usually reminder advertising is the one that we've seen, but there are also I know, informative advertising. And again, more people spend on advertising. Again, most of the time, brands are more recognized and well perceived in general. That's why companies spend, I don't know, $6 million on half a minute advertising on Super Bowl, right? Insane money, and we know logos are important again. And just brief introduction of bad packaging or good packaging. I'm sure you're aware of the Whole Foods disastrous packaging for oranges when they remove the natural packaging and put them in whatever plastic packaging. And I think the noise was so bad, so they just removed it during the day. It was gone from the shelves. And another example of bad packaging, right? It's just, I think we'll get spoiled next minute just in the kitchen, or just good packaging overall. And just briefly, what product placement is, it's, I'm sure you've seen lots of movies, you watch lots of TV shows, and whenever companies silently place their products in the whatever with the plot, and usually you see on your face, right? It's Dell or Apple brand, just the camera angle goes. So these are product placements. People drink cool, whatever beer or drive cool cars in the movies, and they spend millions of dollars on those too. The problem with product placement, it's actually the benefits are it's mass reaching, so people can really see, lots of millions of people can see. But the problem with it, it's very difficult to measure the impact of product placement, because you can't just go to movie theaters and say, did you notice the brand? How much did you notice, or what's your willingness to pay? So eventually, even we changed our kind of a study a little bit just to make sure that we are still measuring if people see the brand, the logo name or no, but it's another cool aspect of the study, just we are measuring the product placement impact on consumer perception and recall as well. And it's depending on the media, the product placement varies. Even now, the social media is picking up really well. And then, I don't know, there are brand promoters and whatever they're called, and it's getting newer vibe, but still it's very early stages. So there are not too many measurements of what's really product placement does for the product. Is it really impactful or no? I think companies might know because of the sales, but that's the only, I think, direction they can go for now, because there is no other way to measure if that's working or no. Another type of product placement is virtual product placement, which companies are already trying to mess around. So basically in the US, we might see Coke brand on the show. People in Europe might see completely different can there, just because it's a virtual product placement. So now everything is like, the show I see might not be the same show you're seeing. So that's kind of creepy, but that's streaming companies especially are trying to figure out new sources for money generation, right? So they can get as much money as possible. So that's where they're going. And So hypothesis for our study is, again, logo alignment impacts the recall, and it's also the second one, kind of subsequent hypothesis is brand recall increases the willingness to pay. And again, we did the study with canned drinks because it was easy. We did field study, it was too noisy. I'll not talk about too much about field study. We did online study, we recorded, I'll talk about the recording. So we used 4 different types of brands, Canada Dry, Schwab's, Polar, and ginger ale, Great Value. The last one is the Walmart brand. I actually couldn't find a better picture for Walmart brand, I don't know for, but they still have it. And actually Great Value is the biggest sale of food items in general in the US by volume, dollar value. So they're still important. It's not many people might know the ginger ale, but it's, the sales are really high. Polar was at the time very local Northeast brand. Now you can find Polar brands, I think in Kroger or Ralph's store, depending which part of the country you're in. And Schweppes and Canada Dry are the most popular ones if you're a ginger ale drinker. So we used 6 different treatments. Condition 1, let's say in 1 when Polar is aligned, misaligned, and then Schweppes is aligned, misaligned, and in 5th and 6th, both are present, but Schweppes is both misaligned, Polar is aligned and misaligned. Of course, we could have 7 and 8 treatments when Polar is misaligned, Schweppes is aligned. It just we had kind of limited resources and we wanted to have enough observations for the treatments we have. So that's why we didn't go with the 7 and 8. So we recorded 6 different sessions with same setup, same camera angle, kind of a party setup when people will drink. But in one case, people will, I don't know if this will play, but anyway, so people would just talk, and then again, in some instances you would see the logo, in some instances you would not see the logo. And sometimes actually what would happen, I'll talk about results later on. So sometimes the logo is not completely covered, but it's not really fully covered too. And we left it that way because in reality, you can't have either really aligned or misaligned. So in most cases, when it was not fully visible, but slightly visible, we still counted it not aligned because you still couldn't see the whole logo. But otherwise, full ones, you would really see the logo in between your hand. And by actually anecdotal evidence, when I talked about having a space between your fingers, one guy said, oh, there is no space. I'm like, there is. But he actually held the can. His hands were so big, it was covering everything. But in most cases, there is that space. So let's say this way, because still varies person by person. So. And just another one, so at least you can see the picture now. Polar is aligned and you could clearly see. And then we had different angles of camera again, just they were 30-second videos. They were embedded in YouTube, which were embedded in Qualtrics, which we collected the data using Amazon AmTurk. So, and we did do, again, online survey. We collected lots of other information along with the recall and willingness to pay questions, like where they're from, education level, gender, whatever. Half of the population were, let's say, respondents were male or female. Average age was 37 years old. I don't know, average household size 2.7 Caucasians. Most of the respondents were Caucasians, and self-shoppers were 82% at least. And we had 1,200 observations, almost around 200 for each treatment. And they were, of course, randomly assigned to one of the treatments by Qualtrics. So, and just education-wise or income-wise, we see kind of a variation around. I don't think there was any significant difference between treatments based on the major characteristics. So at least randomization was done correctly, or we were lucky enough that there were not significant differences by any major socioeconomic characteristic between the groups. So I can't say they're representative of the US population just because I'm sure it's not, we didn't collect enough observations to have a representative population. And most of the people drink ginger ale at home, and the least favorite one is bars and clubs. And actually, we haven't asked on the plane, but again, anecdotal evidence, lots of people drink ginger ale on the plane, right? So, which might be, I'll talk about limitations, that might be a limitation too. And then not surprisingly, taste was the highest valued attribute on the drinks they're buying. And purchase frequency, again, very heavy drinkers or not drinkers, they were only 5% of population each, and then almost equal distribution of other frequencies like once a week, a few times a week, or once or twice a month, and so on. So results, one of the interesting things we can see, so it's basically, first one will be polar only conditions, and then we have Schweppes only conditions, and aligned, misaligned, basically color change. So here we can see that when polar is aligned, we have a significant difference of recall on those. If polar logo is aligned, more people are seeing that, and that difference is significant, basically by statistical values. And actually, if polar is misaligned, more people think they're seeing candid dry compared to if it's aligned. And you might think, let's say, even if it's misaligned, 70% people are still seeing that. That might be because, again, sometimes parts of the logo might be visible. So that's why people are noticing it, even if it's not aligned. But still, when you're aligning it, much more people are seeing it and recalling it compared to not aligning. And same story with the Schweppes. So if it's aligned compared to misaligned, lots of people are seeing Schweppes, or they think they're seeing Schweppes brand. And again, candid dry is when it's misaligned Schweppes. Candid dry is the one that kind of benefits from being misaligned, even though it's not present in the video at all. And one of the most important things when there are two brands present, and let's say Schweppes is misaligned, Polar is aligned, you can see that jump, really significant jump of the alignment. Like recall, almost twice as many people think they're seeing Polar compared to if it's misaligned. And when Polar is misaligned, actually lots of more people are thinking they're seeing Schweppes or candid dry compared to if they're not misaligned. When Polar is aligned, basically, people only, I don't know, 10% of people are thinking they're seeing candid dry or Schweppes wrongly. But otherwise, if Polar is misaligned, more people think they're seeing brands they know of, but not Polar, which is one of the advantages of new companies or the smaller brands, at least to align that the technology will help them to be more, be more visible to public. Compared to, let's say, Coke, I don't think they really care too much because that red color gives away, everybody knows what Coke is, right? So nobody, I don't think Coca-Cola company cares about that, but might be, I'm sure they will benefit, but more for smaller companies, that might be much beneficial to be to increase the awareness. When it comes to willingness to pay, the difference, there's just tiny bit of difference, but not significant. Anything was not significant. But one of the interesting things we did, even for dual brand condition, there was incremental changes, but nothing was significant. But one of the things that we really wanted to know, let's say, if people thought they're seeing that brand, even wrongly, we wanted to measure that willingness to pay of that brand. Because let's say, even if I'm wrongly thinking I'm seeing, let's say, candid dry, but my willingness to pay was always kind of high, except Schweppes. You can see that difference of willingness to pay. If they think they are seeing the brand, it's much higher. So if they are sure they're seeing the brand, I think the willingness to pay would be too high. But otherwise, in this case, it was kind of see whether or not, even if they are wrongly deciding they're seeing some of the brands, what's their willingness to pay for that brand. And the differences were significant for most of them except Schweppes. Just basic analysis, regression analysis also shows that significance. Discussion-wise, I would say, again, it's important, it matters. And again, we didn't do exactly what we are supposed to do, like to see peer effect, but for that, we need much more resources and time to collect all that data. Let's say most likely the best way will be, let's say, in a restaurant or social gathering, when I see somebody drinking the drink with a line, do I go and pick up that drink from the, whatever the area, table? But we did, again, that in the dining room was too noisy. We couldn't record the sessions, and we couldn't even know if somebody else comes in, is he or she's around that first person that came from. So eventually we didn't use too much of the field study, but overall for the smaller companies, that would be much beneficial. And I think we can do cost benefit analysis. I don't know how much the cost will be to implement that technology. I know the technology is available in Japan, and I know some people were trying to patent it in the US. I just don't know how much will it cost for the company to implement the technology and to see whether or not the company will benefit by implementing the technology, but still increases the willingness to awareness of the brands, and again, might be more beneficial for smaller companies. Limitations, again, the drink selection might have an issue because again, it's people like it or don't like it, right? Ginger ale. And again, I mentioned airplane. I'm drinking tomato juice in airplane, but that's the only place I'm drinking tomato juice too. So I don't know if people only drink ginger ale on the plane. So that might be cool thing to figure out also. And length of the video will play a role too, because we had only half a minute clips. But if you have a 1 hour, 30-minute long movie, the attention might be completely different, right? Or depending on the type of the product, not just drink, but if you have another product placement type of, I don't know, computers or things, might be completely different response from consumers. And we didn't provide any information to participants as well. So future work, again, will be more treatments, more product selection, and more variation of the videos, at least to measure those differences and see whether or not they are impacting or not impacting the consumer recall and willingness to pay. And just at the end, the ideal study would be, let's say we had Mountain Dew, 7-Up, two similar brands. One of them implements the technology, and then after 1 year or so, we do definitive analysis and see if their sales went up or down depending on the technology adoption. So that would be really ideal, but unfortunately, as a researcher, we don't have that luxury to do. But if I was the CEO of the company, I would try. And so how important? It is important. It increases the awareness, might be more important for smaller companies than big ones. And again, this is actually one of the first studies, at least, to measure the impact of the product placement and kind of give any type of measurements to these type of studies, because they're all more of an anecdotal or just behind the scenes, like sales-based studies, rather than just really measuring what the product placement impact has. So, and with that, questions? Yeah.
Also see hold right? So it's peer right? That also plays a role.
So in the videos, yes, again, there are different parts of the video. It's just one view when I start and you see the clip. And I'm sure depending who hosts the drink might have an impact, because if it's a celebrity or very famous or the cool guy in the group drink something, other people might follow. It just really, I can't tell if how much the impact would be. But in this case, I think this doesn't matter, because let's say the views you see, this is just one cut, and then there is a camera angle from here, and taking from the cooler, and then there's another angle when there's like just you see only the hands, and the brand is visible or not. But yes. Might be. So yeah, the thing is, again, ideal would be to do that in real life. This one just was a video cut, so I don't know exactly how much the video impacts the selection, but that would be another question to answer, even the video, the quality, and also whatever the length of the video, also the brand, products used, I'm sure will change the results, just don't know which direction. That answers the question. Yes.
So this is pretty interesting to me, but I wonder about some brands that are kind of have become names for things like themselves. Like we were talking about Coke So do you think there's, and you kind of mentioned how there's lesser effect for getting dry drugs because they're already well-known. But how do you think that plays into research or applications of this with some products that are so prevalent that they kind of take over the lane?
I think for now, well, we're trying to figure out whether or not I say, oh, but yeah, it's bad. You have to we didn't do that just because of that reason. But I just don't know how much. Yeah. Because depending on that, that might just be compared to older like 1 million and not that much expensive. So depending on that often analysis, some companies might benefit with each depending on the costs. For some companies, it might extra effort, but then it might be even more kind of giving market share, but I'm sure often as they are working on all market share on strong branding. Long run time. So I would say it's a cost benefit analysis. Numbers to get but for the companies that much. Thank you very much.
So next we'll have Dylan from University of Florida. So Dylan, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ding Duan. I'm an incoming PhD student this fall semester at the University of Florida. Today, I'm going to be talking about the trends in consumer preference for eco-labeled food with a taxonomy and topic modeling approach. This study is conducted by me, Dr. Zhifeng Gao, Adar Yefan, and Dr. Li from the University of Florida. So the motivation behind this study is that producers and farmers in the food market are getting involved in promoting eco-labeled foods and working as bridges between consumers and the producers, farmers. A substantial number of researchers have done study on consumers' willingness to pay for food with eco-labels. And this research covers a wide scope of food products with different attributes and with consumers from different countries. So to provide a thorough review of current literature on consumers' willingness to pay for eco-labeled foods, we applied a machine learning method to do such result. And here are several points that we generated from our research. The first one is that we reached the research hit over the years from the research that we collected. And second is that we generated the food product frequency that are being researched by researchers over the years. And the third is the willingness to pay methods used by researchers in these studies. And finally, we generated the topic and the topic trends from 2001 to 2020. So based on the results, we're gonna give suggestions for potential research directions for future studies. The data we use for this research is searched on Web of Science using a combination of keywords listed in the table from the time range of 2001 to 2020. So the keywords are centered around eco-labeled food, green food, sustainable food, willingness to pay, consumer preference, and so on. So the original data set has over 4,000 papers, but our interest is only lies on the food products and also willingness to pay studies. So after scrutinizing, we excluded the papers that are not centered around food products, like research with those keywords on car industry, electricity, energy. We excluded those studies. And also we eliminated studies that doesn't have a willingness to pay elicitation. And then the final result is 317 papers. The method we use for this research is topic modeling and taxonomy. For topic modeling, we applied latent Dirichlet allocation model, and the input for this model is the abstract of each paper that we collected, because abstract has a overall picture of what research idea is and what research goal and research results are. So there are several important index in LDA model that needs to be defined by researcher before using this model. So the first and the most important one is the topic number that you're gonna willing to have for all your documents. And the second one is alpha and beta, which is the Dirichlet parameter for the LDA model. And then next is a theta distribution, for which stands for the per document topic proportions. So this is another important index for LDA results. Say if you are gonna have 4 topics for all your documents, then for each document, it could be part of each topic with the 4 topics. So theta tells you the proportion of the 4 topics in each document, so you can get an idea of what this topic, what this document could be most likely be assigned to which topic with the most largest proportion of theta. Moving on to the results of our study, the first is a publication trends over the years. We can see that the number of studies are increasing over the years from 2001 to 2020. And next is the food product frequency that are being researched over the years. We can see that from this word cloud, the top 3 products are tomato, apple, and milk. Those are also the frequently purchased items on the food market, and those are also common products. For products that are being less frequently researched are products like blackberry, strawberry, broccoli, with less than 10 frequency in all of the studies that we have collected. And moving on to the label frequency that we have in our database, we can see that the most largest proportion is organic production, followed by a region. So these 2 are the top 2 sustainable attributes used by researchers over the years. Moving on to the willingness to pay elicitation method, we can see that from this pie chart, over 15% of researchers has used a hypothetical choice experiment, and followed by open-ended contingent evaluation method with 14%. And notice that real choice experiment is also 4%. So choice experiment has the largest proportion over all the willingness to pay method. Finally, we have the LDA results for the topics. We use 7 as our topic number for the research, and the topic 1 to 7 is listed with a decreasing proportion. So topic 1 has the largest proportion over the 7 topics, and we can see the keywords are organic information, environment, conventional consumption. So we name this topic as organic information on health and environment. As the word cloud shows before, organic is the top 1 attribute that are being researched by studies. So researchers are paying more attention to the effects of additional information on environmental benefits and health benefits of organic production to see if consumers are willing to pay more for such labeled food. Topic 2 is centered around safe food, sustainable environment, ag, latent class animal welfare. So we name this topic as seafood, egg, and animal welfare. So seafood is frequently purchased items because nowadays consumers are pursuing a more healthier diet, and seafood has the good quality proteins. So consumers are researchers are paying more attention to the environmental benefits and sustainable benefits with seafood related products. For topic three is the only topic that contains a country's name, which is China. And other keywords are organic, certificate, safety, quality, trust. Thus, this topic is named as Chinese Consumer Trust. This topic is present probably because there are a lot of food scandals on China's food market over the years, with the most notorious one of counterfeit baby formula in the beginning of 2000, which hampers a lot of newborns' health, and following by those scandals like poisonous meat, contaminated egg products. Moving on to topic 4. Topic 4 contains words like sustainable, fair trade, ethic, eco-friendly coffee. So this topic is clearly fair trade coffee. Fair trade is an ethical label centered stressed on labor conditions and human rights, and coffee is identified as the firmly established fair trade products on the food market. For topic 5, we name this one as origin and organic because there are words like local, carbon, organic, import, restaurant. So this topic is clear about origin and organic. This also justifies the word cloud results before that these two attributes are most frequently researched attributes. Next, for topic 6, we name it as genetically modified free meat because there are keywords like meat, genetically modified free, GM, GMO. Because nowadays consumers are paying more attention to genetically modified free food because they are having an aversion to gene edited food and techniques used to transform food to non-natural foods. Next topic is about wine, milk, beer with other keywords like taste, information. All these 3 products are credence foods that consumers can only tell certain attributes after they actually purchase and taste it. And this one has a list of proportion over 7 topics. And then moving on to the topic trends over the years. The 7 topics, except for topic 7, topic 1 to topic 6 are all significantly increasing over the years. This also justifies that the interest on willingness to pay studies are increasing over the years. So our study has generated several insights on the willingness to pay studies over the years. The first is that we can see that there is an increasing trend over the years for eco-labeling research. And the second is that we generated summarization results on the products and labels that are frequently researched. The first, the top 3 products are apple, tomato, milk, and the labels, the top 2 research labels are organic and origin. For willingness to pay methods, over 50% of methods are hypothetical trust experiments. And for topic that we generated, the first 3 topics that has the largest proportion are organic, seafood, animal welfare, and Chinese consumer trust. So based on the results, we have generated a thorough understanding of what current literature is doing, like what are the frequently researched products and what are the frequently used attributes for consumers' willingness to pay. Then we have seen that hypothetical choice experiments has the largest proportion over all the method. But this method has the limitation of overestimating willingness to pay. So future researchers can also focus on more about scanner data and secondary data. And finally, researchers can pay more attention to the effects of same label on different products on consumers' willingness to pay. Thank you. Do you have any questions and comments? Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ye Fan. I'm a PhD student from UF. So today I'm going to present a paper conducted by me and some of my co-authors. The title of my presentation is "Does Data Label Matter for Agriculture Food Product Waste?" So my co-authors are Joanna Van Asselt, Julia Cruz, Dr. Jiffen Gao, and Dr. Steve Morgan. This project really, I mean, we started to think about this project when Dr. Steve Morgan was assistant professor at UF. So now he moved to USDA ERS. So this research doesn't really apply to any perspective from USDA ERS. So the motivation about this paper is we see food waste becomes increasingly recognized an important issue in the overall food value chains. So it has implications on environmental problems, food securities, or overall sustainability of our food systems. So according to FDA report in 2020, it estimates about 30 or 40% of food supply is wasted every year in the US. So that's really a lot. That waste is going to create a lot of problem for the environment problem, because you think about how much food we produce and how much resources we use to when we produce food in the process. All those food are wasted. So in the long term, if we want to promote sustainability of agriculture, we really think about how we can reduce food waste in our food consumptions. And then when we decompose the food waste in different parts, like where is food waste come from? So we basically say home consumption is the major part. It contributes about 43% of overall food waste. So in the if we want to really target to try to solve this issue, we really need to think about how we can reduce home consumption's food waste. And in this perspective, we should really understand the drives of consumers' food discard decisions, because their decision-making process is really important to reduce those kind of food waste and to move on to the sustainability of agriculture. And when we look at literatures, basically a lot of previous literatures find people's food waste decision is very product varied. So their research try to analyze the frequency of US consumers discard different food items. So he basically find that consumers are more likely to throw away the perishable food product, such as vegetables or fruit, than non-perishable food products, such as breakfast cereals, all those packaged food products. So in the research, we really need to focus on different products to see how people make decisions for different products. So that's why it motivated us to really study agriculture product. Because in the literature, many studies have already done for the agriculture product. There's a very thin literature on how people make decisions to waste the agriculture food products. There's also literature saying consumers' confusion could play a significant role here about date label. So when we go to daily basis to buy the groceries, we see all different kind of format to format expiration date or the date label. Sometimes they use best if used by, sometimes they use by, sometimes they use sell by. But from policy perspective in the US, there's no really federal level regulations about food date labels, except infant formula. So there's no really, that's why we see a lot of different phrases use the full label. So in this research, we're really trying to find out how those different phrases might affect people's decisions. Are those phrases really play a role there? And whether and to what extent the food labels might affect consumers' decisions to discard food product. So to study these issues, we basically developed a chart experiment because this research really is a preliminary result. We haven't fully finished the project. We just got started the project. We basically use the shrimp as focal products. We choose shrimp because it's the most commonly consumed seafood in the market. It actually is #1 consumed seafood by US consumers. And for the food date labels, we basically use 3 labels. We use these labels because there's other report or third-party associations. They try to propose a framework kind of how we should label the date. Because they can use different phrases to indicate different aspects of your food product. And also I think UK government also actually did a very good job. They kind of move along with those proposed. They try to use different phrases to regulate different to mention different aspects of your date, call it food safety issues. So basically there are 3 labels. The first one is sell by. It kind of indicates how long the retailers should display for the product for sales, for inventory management. So that label shouldn't really mention anything about your food safety or food quality issues. It should be mainly used by the inventories or by the retailers. And then we use the second label is best if used by. That label basically should indicate food quality rather than food safety issues. So basically, let's say your food, if you consume food after the date indicated by this label, it should just really say your food quality might not be good, but it really shouldn't have any implications about your safeties when you consume this type of food. And last one we have used by. Those labels should really relate to the food safety issues to indicate people say that might not be very safe to consume this food after the date. So for our chart experiment, we also included other attributes. So we have the product type, whether it's frozen raw or frozen prepared, and also we have original food product, either USA or imported of Florida. Then we use the different labels, and then we have expiration date. I mean, expiration date is really kind of a confusing term there. Should be the date after the date labels. So we have 10, 20, and 30, and 40. So in the right of the screen, you will see example chart experiment, example choice set people will see. So they will basically see 2 products, and we ask them which one of the product they are more likely to dispose of. So as for each respondent, they will answer 9 choice set. So as I mentioned before, this really is preliminary result. We just got started. We tested the survey, did a pilot study, and tried to see whether there is significance and whether there is some room to improve our studies and move along in the future. So we basically distributed survey among undergraduate students at UF, and we only have 54 total response for the survey right now. And to analyze data, because we have small data, so we only use conditional logic to estimate consumers' food dispose decisions. Because the small sample issue, we couldn't really impose any heterogeneous preference in our models. So basically, we have utility functions based on different attributes of the chart experiment. And as you may notice, we didn't have price attributes in our chart experiment as what people normally do in for the purchase decision kind of research. So we have the date and other things. We basically propose this estimate of willingness to dispose those estimates is basically negative ratio between different attributes over the coefficient related with date. So the implication of those estimates really is how many more days respondents are willing to wait to dispose their food product with certain attributes. So here's our result. So basically, if you see the first row is the date attribute, that attribute is positive and significant. That basically means when the date becomes longer, people actually have more utility to dispose this food. So they are more likely to dispose this food. This really aligns with our thought in the yeah. So next we have frozen roll, basically type product. We didn't see any significance in this product. So basically people probably don't think the type of food really matters. They're gonna throw away food after certain days, but they really didn't vary by type of products. And also the original products really doesn't matter, except the imported kind of have significant results on people's disposal decisions. More interestingly in this research is best buy and use by. Since we use sell by as our base level, so those attributes are positive significant, basically indicates that when people see those two attributes, those two data labels, they are compared to the sell by labels, they are more likely to throw away food when they see these two labels. And then for our summary willingness to dispose estimate, we basically find it negative for best buy and use by. That basically means compared to the use by attribute, use by labels, when people say best buy, when compared to sell by data labels, when people say the best buy, they are more likely to dispose food 10 days earlier than that sell by label. And the same thing for use by. When people say use by labels, they are more likely to throw away food 17 days earlier than when they see the sell by labels. So in the conclusion, so basically the majority of respondents really paid attention to data labels when they basically decide whether they will throw away food or not. Because in the survey, we asked the question, did you pay attention to those labels or not when you make decisions? Most of them say they did pay attention to those labels. So we can see the data label really plays a significant role in people's decision-making to discarding food. And secondly, respondents to decision to waste food does not vary by type of food product, because we have the frozen raw and frozen prepared. That attribute really doesn't matter when people make decisions. And then we see there's a lot of evidence saying people's decision to discard food varies based on type of data labels you might use on the product. So the use by label was found to be most likely label to be disposed of. When people see these labels, they see directly implications of those labels might have some effect for me. So that's why they are more likely to throw away food when they see these kind of data labels in the food product. So in the future research, as I mentioned, because this is really preliminary results, so we really need to distributing surveys among more real consumers, more consumers who really consume seafood in a daily basis. And then we also will be interesting to test whether information treatment on those data labels on people's decision making, and how those information treatment are kind of increased knowledge about the meaning of the data labels, how those things can affect people's decision making on food discarding. And lastly, we'll be interested to test the alternative behavior rules or heuristics on people's decision-making process in food waste decisions. Because in the current theoretical framework, we basically use the maximum utility framework. But in the behavior economics, there are lots of alternative behaviors to try to explain people's behavior. For example, satisfaction behavior, basically saying people have kind of cutoff point. When they see the cutoff point, they will choose dispose or not. For example, when people say, I see the food expired 10 days, I definitely will throw away food after that, for sure, no matter how long will be stay there or not. So we'll be interested in test that theory, and also we'll be interested in test some reference dependent behaviors, basically say how people's reference points might affect people's decisions in food waste scenario. So with that, we'll wrap up my presentation. Thank you all very much for listening. If you have any questions and feedback, I would love to hear them. Thank you. Yeah.
So in general, let's say on the show, you see the best buy, whatever, sell by or whatever, but there are dates, right?
Yes.
Like not in 10 days, but it's like, I don't know, August 10th, August 20th.
Yeah.
But my question is, do you think if it's a date instead of saying it's in 10 days, 40 days, 30 days, will that matter? Because sometimes even when you read, you have to calculate the date from that exact, so it sometimes gets even more confusing, and
yeah.
it's next month, even next month can be let's say 10 days or 40 days, right? So but
yeah.
It's next month, okay, it's still okay, but if it's same month but last day, I might not buy it, but it's still the same month, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So basically in this trial experiment, I mean, right now we try to show you guys have the clear picture, like how many days they will have. But we basically put this survey on Qualtrics. So we have the JavaScript to basically say the date. Like 10 days ago is actual dates. We calculate the date in that date disappeared on that labels. So people see actual date. Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
One of the they're both pros and cons. So I feel like that conclusion would be more apt for like a fresh trend versus or like a totally different product, like a produce meat product. Yeah, or a different frozen product, even, frozen chicken. But like I see those as like one bread or both frozen. So I'm not making that much of a difference.
Yeah, that's right. Probably is I didn't explain that very well when I present. So basically what I mean is, if you see, I mean, I totally agree in the previous literatures, they say when you see different products, you will see people's decision-making process will be totally different. For example, perishable, not perishable product. But in this scenario, I really want to try to say is, when you see a shrimp, it doesn't matter what shrimp it is, like it is cooked or prepared or raw, that doesn't matter. That's really what I'm trying to say. Within the same product, but how they prepare the product, that thing really doesn't matter in this scenario. Yeah. It could also the chance that we only have like undergraduate students doing the survey, so it really pilot side. So in the downside, we have more general consumers. We might have probably different results in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
So I was just looking at the different features comparing apples and shrimp, and I was thinking the other one was a paired product. What if it was a ready to eat product?
Yeah, I agree. So that it will be definitely interesting to test whether ready to eat food product and kind of raw product. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Thank you very much. We probably will consider that in the future. Yep.
Yeah, I'm curious, what percentage of people chose different
I totally agree with that. But I mean, it's really good comments. That's why we just started doing this research, because it's different product, and because your food waste decision really product varies. So that's, I mean, there's a lot of research on agriculture products. We really want to see. Yeah, probably we'll find the seafood like in seafood scenario, people are less likely to go away, right? So it could be also interesting. I mean, that's why we're doing this research, trying to see whether agriculture's product have a little bit different implications than agricultural product. And also there are literature saying the seafood consumers demographics is slightly different from the people who consume daily agricultural products. They are more well educated, they have higher income. So those type of people might have different behaviors than like general consumers. So it will be interesting to actually launch our survey in a more general consumers, and we will have screening questions to ask whether you consume seafood on a daily basis to see how those type of respondents might have different behaviors than other people's already. Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions, one of which is, this is a good example, but because the willingness to dispose you estimated was -17 for two farmers, remember correctly?
Yes.
Compared to sell by.
Yeah.
Those two, like in that example, you have 30 days sell by, 30 days ago sell by, 10 days ago use by. Would that suggest that the consumers are closer to a toss-up between how they interpret both of them? Like there's, there's a difference in 20 days there, so.
Yeah, well, but in the choice one, we really didn't mention that. I mean, ideally, if you use choice learning, you can predict basically estimates and predict more likely in different scenarios, right? Very hypothetical scenarios, and to see how many people will waste that. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, we do agree. If we might interested test whether we change our attributes to a longer, see if that would be changing people's behavior or change our estimates here for this.
Well, I'm mostly asking, it seems to me that this, if I'm interpreting it correctly, that someone looking at a use by date that was 10 days ago and then looking at a sell by date that was 20 days ago.
Yeah.
Like those are the same in consumer mind. What this is kind of telling me. If that's the case, then that tells me they're completely wrong about the way that they date the consumer. Because we're saying sell by date is likely the earliest, right? Because the sell by date is when the consumer put the manager or the retailer.
Oh no, yeah, this is sorry. This result is a little bit because we use 10 days ago or 20 days ago. It really indicates the sell by have like the expired dates, like compared to expired date longer. People actually dispose food. People actually wait a longer time to dispose food when they see the sell by dates more than 7 days.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That means that they're interpreting it wrong.
Yeah, people will wait longer to waste food.
Is that accurate? I know you said there's no federal regulation, but is that accurate about the dates, right?
Well, it should be because when you think about those labels, the framework we propose that sell by is it's kind of inventory, so you really shouldn't care about that. But the use by and those days should really matter because that's really safe to the safety. So people when they see those labels, they probably should wait shorter time to eat those food because it's not safe after eating that after the taste, right?
Then, yeah, the other suggestion that I have in addition is, if you can add having some pictures if it's a sell by it is fine, because I know I've seen product before the patent forward. So
Yeah.
see then how they interpret those dates.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. That's really good suggestion. Any other questions? Okay. With that, I'll wrap my presentation. And thank you all very much for showing up this session. We'll end this session, the full leveling. Hope you all have a good day in the rest of the day and enjoy other presentations or might go home, have a safe trip.